The expensive china teacup trembled in my mother's manicured hands as she set it down on my coffee table. The same coffee table I'd found at a thrift store and lovingly restored during countless sleepless nights after double shifts. "Sarah, sweetheart, you need to understand. Your brother needs this house more than you do. He's starting a real family." My mother's voice was silk-wrapped steel, the same tone she'd used 5 years ago when telling me there was simply no space for me anymore in their 4,000-square-foot home. I looked around my modest living room, the warm gray walls I'd painted myself, the second-hand furniture I'd carefully chosen, each piece representing countless overtime hours and missed meals. 5 years of blood, sweat, and tears had transformed this once dilapidated foreclosure into my sanctuary. "Real family," I repeated softly, the words tasting like ash. In my peripheral vision, I caught my brother James shifting uncomfortably on my couch, the same brother who'd said nothing when they'd packed my things in garbage bags on my 18th birthday. "Well, yes," my father chimed in, his businessman's confidence unwavering. "Lisa's pregnant, and they need somewhere stable. You're just one person, and this 3-bedroom house is really too big for you anyway." He smiled, as if he'd just proposed a perfectly reasonable business transaction. "We'll help you find a nice apartment." The sunlight streaming through my carefully restored windows caught the slight swell of Lisa's belly, my brother's wife of 6 months. She hadn't met my eyes once during this ambush disguised as a Sunday family visit. "I don't understand," I managed, my voice surprisingly steady despite the hurricane of emotions in my chest. "You want me to just give away my house? The house I bought myself? To James?" "Not give away, darling," my mother corrected, reaching for her tea again. "Sign over to family. Surely you remember how important family is?" Her smile was sharp. "After all, family helps family, and you do want to help your family, don't you?" The irony of her words hit me like a physical blow. Family helps family. Where was that sentiment on that rainy November evening 5 years ago when I'd stuffed whatever I could fit into my beaten-up Honda Civic? Where was family when I was sleeping in that same car through a bitter winter, too proud to tell my coworkers I was homeless? I looked at my brother again, really looked at him. His designer watch probably cost more than 3 of my mortgage payments. The entitled expectation in his eyes made my stomach turn. "I think," I said slowly, my voice gathering strength with each word, "that you should finish your tea and leave." "Sarah!" My mother's shock was almost comical. "Don't be difficult, we're trying to help." "Help who?" The silence that followed my question hung heavy in the air, thick with 5 years of unspoken truths. My mother's perfectly plucked eyebrows drew together in that familiar expression of disappointment, the one I'd seen countless times growing up as the difficult child. "You know, Sarah," my father broke the silence, his voice taking on that patronizing tone he used in board meetings, "your attitude has always been your biggest problem. Even as a child, you never understood the bigger picture." The bigger picture? I almost laughed. Images flashed through my mind, the gradual transformation of our family over the years. It hadn't always been like this. There was a time before James started high school when we were actually happy. Before Dad's promotion changed everything. I remembered the exact moment our family shifted. I was 14, James 16, when Dad came home announcing his executive position. Within weeks, we moved from our modest suburban home to the sprawling mansion in the prestigious Oak Hill neighborhood. Suddenly, appearances became everything. James adapted perfectly. Star quarterback, straight-A student, perfect son. I remained stubbornly myself. Artsy, quiet, more interested in books than social climbing. The divide grew deeper each year. "I understand the bigger picture perfectly," I replied, standing up from my armchair. "I understood it the day you told me I had a month to move out because you needed my room for Dad's home office. I was 17, by the way. Not even 18. We gave you plenty of notice," my mother interjected, her cheeks flushing, "and we offered to help with your first month's rent." "My first month's rent," I repeated incredulously. "With what job? What savings? I was still in high school." Lisa, my brother's wife, squirmed uncomfortably on the couch. At least someone in the room had the decency to feel ashamed. "You're being dramatic," James finally spoke, his voice carrying that familiar, condescending tone. "Plenty of people move out at 18. It builds character." "At 18, I emphasized. "With preparation, with support, not with garbage bags and a pat on the back." The memories surfaced despite my attempts to suppress them. That final month in my childhood home had been a slow torture. Watching my mother systematically clear out my room, making plans for the renovation before I'd even left. Hearing them discuss paint samples over dinner while I silently calculated how far I could stretch my minimum wage paycheck from the local diner. "We did what was best for the family," my father stated firmly. "My position required a certain image. A home office was essential for client meetings. And the pool house you converted the following year, was that essential too?" More silence. James shifted in his seat, his Rolex catching the light. "That's ancient history," my mother waved her hand dismissively. "We're here to discuss the present. James and Lisa need..." "Need?" I cut her off. "Like I needed a home? Like I needed parents who cared whether I had a roof over my head?" "You're being ridiculous," James snapped. "Lisa's pregnant. We're having a baby. A real family needs..." "A real family," I echoed, the words bitter on my tongue. "You keep using that phrase. I guess I've never been real family, have I?" The room fell silent again. Outside, a lawnmower hummed. My neighbor Tom, probably, the same neighbor who'd taught me how to fix my leaky faucet when I first moved in, who'd helped me install my security cameras, who'd been more family to me than my own blood. My mother set down her teacup with a sharp clink. "Sarah, you're making this unnecessarily difficult. We're trying to have a reasonable discussion about what's best for everyone." "Everyone?" I looked around my living room again, at the life I'd built from nothing, the bookshelf I'd rescued from a curb and refinished, the throw pillows I'd learned to sew because I couldn't afford store-bought ones, the diploma on the wall that represented 4 years of working days and studying nights. "Let me tell you about everyone," I said quietly. "Let me tell you about what's best for everyone." "Actually," I said, walking to my bookshelf and pulling out a worn leather journal, "let me show you something." My hands trembled slightly as I opened it to the first page, dated 5 years ago. I kept track of everything. My mother's eyes widened slightly. She'd always hated when I documented things, said it was unhealthy to dwell on the past. "November 15th, I read, my voice steady despite the emotions churning inside. "First night in car, temperature 34 degrees. Used emergency blanket from trunk, need better solution before real winter hits. Sarah, this is unnecessary," my father started, but I continued reading. November 20th, found gym with $20 monthly membership. Can shower there before work. Manager Dave seemed suspicious of my large gym bag but didn't ask questions. Thank God. Lisa's hand moved unconsciously to her slightly swollen belly. James wouldn't meet my eyes. December 25th. My voice caught slightly. Christmas Day. Saw family photos on Facebook. New home office looks amazing. Designer desk in my old room. James got a new car. Worked double shift at diner. Tips were good. Holiday generosity. $127. Saved $100 for car repair fund. Treated myself to real meal at Denny's with extra $27. "If you're trying to make us feel guilty," James began. "Guilty?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "No, James. I'm trying to help you understand what real family looks like. January 3rd. Car wouldn't start. -5 degrees. Slept in diner storage room. Maria from night shift covered for me. Didn't tell her why. Too ashamed." I flipped a few pages. February 14th, Valentine's Day rush at diner. Made $200 in tips. Added $150 to apartment fund. Now at $1,247. Need $3,000 for deposit and first last month's rent. 8 more weeks at this rate. Found out today James got engaged to Lisa. Mom's Facebook post got 342 likes. My mother's hands were shaking now. Good. "Please stop," Lisa whispered. It was the first time she'd spoken. I ignored her. March 22nd. Finally found apartment that will accept my credit. Roaches and suspicious stains, but has shower and actual bed. Real estate agent said I need 2 years of stable rent history before considering home loan. Starting community college next week. Financial aid and night classes. Can keep both jobs if I skip lunch breaks. "You never told us," my father started. "Told you?" I slammed the journal shut. "When, exactly? Between your client dinners and charity galas? Or maybe during the family holidays I wasn't invited to? Should I have sent a greeting card? Dear family, sleeping in Walmart parking lot tonight. Wish you were here." If you're enjoying the story till now, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. It costs you nothing, but for us, especially in these early days, it means the world. Let's continue. That first year, I continued, setting the journal down, I learned more about family than you could imagine. The diner cook who'd slip me mistake orders during slow nights. The gym manager who started leaving the lost and found box unlocked, knowing I needed clean clothes. The library security guard who'd pretend not to notice me napping in the quiet study room between shifts. I walked to my window, looking out at the neat garden I'd planted last spring. While you were remodeling your pool house, I was learning how to sleep sitting up in a Honda Civic. While James was planning his engagement party, I was calculating how many packets of ketchup I could take from the diner to supplement my meals. "We thought you had a plan," my mother whispered. "You always said you wanted independence." Independence? I turned back to face them. Is that what you tell yourselves? That kicking out your teenage daughter was somehow doing her a favor? James stood up abruptly. "This is ridiculous. You're acting like we ruined your life. But look at you now. You have a house, a degree. Obviously, it worked out." "Worked out?" My voice rose slightly. "Let me tell you about worked out, James. Let me tell you about showering in gas station bathrooms, about choosing between gas money and food, about watching my high school friends go to college while I served them coffee between my shifts at Walmart." Lisa was crying silently now. My mother wouldn't look at me. My father's jaw was set in that familiar, stubborn line. "But you're right, James. I did make it work. Every single day I made it work. Every extra shift, every missed meal, every night course, every overtime hour. I made it work. Not because of you, in spite of you." Moving into Section 4, which requires exactly 2,000 words, focusing on the middle conflict and escalating tensions. Middle conflict, 2,000 words. A notification pinged on James's phone, probably another business email. The sound broke the heavy silence and he quickly silenced it, but not before I caught sight of his lock screen. A sonogram photo, my unborn niece or nephew. The sight made my chest ache in a way I hadn't expected. "You know," I said more softly, "I used to dream about this moment. During those first few months in my car, I'd imagine you all showing up, apologizing, saying it was all a terrible mistake." I smiled sadly. I had this whole speech prepared about forgiveness and family healing. "We can still have that," my mother said eagerly, latching onto my softer tone. "That's what family is about, moving forward. And now with the baby coming—" "Moving forward," I interrupted, "doesn't mean pretending the past didn't happen, and it certainly doesn't mean giving away my house. But that's exactly what this could be." My mother stood up, animated now. "A fresh start for everyone. You could live closer to us. We could have regular family dinners. Be there for the baby. In a nice apartment," my father added helpfully. "Something cozy." The audacity of their proposal hit me anew. They wanted to recreate the perfect family image, but on their terms. Again. "Let me paint you a picture," I said, sitting back down in my chair. "While you're planning my relocation to a cozy apartment, let me tell you about how I got this house." James sighed dramatically, but Lisa touched his arm, keeping him seated. 3 years of community college classes between shifts. Another year to finish my bachelor's while working full-time. Do you know what it's like to study accounting until 2 a.m., then serve breakfast at 6? I looked at James. Of course you don't. You had a private tutor and Dad's connections for internships. I worked hard for those internships, James protested. I'm sure you did, just like I worked hard to get my first entry-level bookkeeping job. The difference is I was also working 2 other jobs to keep my roach-infested apartment. Every morning, I'd put on my thrift store suit, praying the stains weren't visible, and pretend I wasn't exhausted from my night shift at the convenience store. My father shifted uncomfortably. Good suits and appearances. That was language he understood. But I was good at it. Really good. Turns out all those hours calculating tips and stretching dollars made me excellent at accounting. I got promoted, then promoted again. We were so proud when we heard, my mother interjected. We always knew you had potential. Proud? I cut her off. Is that why you never called, never visited, never even sent a text? I found out you knew about my job from Maria at the diner, who heard it from her cousin who works in your country club. More uncomfortable silence. 2 years of saving every penny, living on ramen and discount produce. No vacations, no new clothes, no social life. Just work and saving. Do you know how many overtime hours it takes to save for a house down payment on an entry-level salary? I stood up again, unable to stay still. Then another 6 months of rejections from banks. Too young, too single, too risky. Finally found one that would take a chance. This house was a mess foreclosure, needed everything. But it was mine. And you've done a lovely job with it, my mother said quickly, which is exactly why it would be perfect for James and Lisa. They could move right in, and with the baby. Do you remember what you said when I invited you to my housewarming party? I asked quietly. My mother's face fell. James looked confused. He probably didn't even know there had been a party. You said you were busy, had a charity gala, but the real reason... I walked to my hallway closet and pulled out a crumpled invitation. You said, and I quote, "That neighborhood isn't really our scene, darling. What would our friends think?" Lisa gasped softly. Even James looked uncomfortable now. But now that I've fixed it up, now that I've replaced every window, updated the kitchen, landscaped the yard, now it's suddenly good enough for your precious son? That's not fair, my father said sternly. This isn't about the past. This is about family, about legacy, about providing for the next generation. Legacy? I laughed bitterly. Let me tell you about legacy, Dad. My legacy is in every nail I hammered, every wall I painted, every night I spent on YouTube learning home repairs because I couldn't afford professionals. My legacy is in the garden out there, where I grow my own vegetables because I still can't shake the memory of being hungry. James stood up abruptly. Enough with the poverty porn, Sarah. We get it. You struggled. But you're not struggling now, and I'm about to be a father. This isn't about you anymore. Not about me. I stepped closer to him. This house is me, James. Every square inch of it. While you were getting married at the country club wedding I wasn't invited to. By the way, I was here, laying tile in the bathroom. While you were honeymooning in Bali, I was replacing the water heater. Alone. On Christmas Day, because that's when I could get a deal on installation. But that's exactly why, Lisa started, then fell silent under my gaze. Why what, Lisa? Why you deserve it more? Because you married the favorite child? Because you're carrying the golden grandchild? Tell me, what exactly gives you the right to demand the one thing I built from nothing? A heavy silence filled the room. Outside, thunder rumbled, a spring storm approaching. How fitting. You know what the worst part is? I said, walking to my living room window. You actually think you're being generous. You think you're doing me a favor by offering to help me find an apartment, as if downsizing my life for James is some sort of privilege. That's not, my mother began, but stopped when my father touched her arm. Sarah, he said, using his negotiator voice, the one that closed million-dollar deals. Let's be practical about this. You're a single woman with a promising career. You don't need all this space. James and Lisa will need room for the nursery, and as the family grows... As the family grows, I repeated, turning back to face them. You know what's ironic? Last month I was approved to be a foster parent. The shock on their faces would have been comical if it wasn't so painful. A foster… what? My mother sputtered. Why would you… Because some children need homes, I said quietly. Because some of us remember what it's like to have nowhere to go. The home study is next week. I've already started furnishing one of the bedrooms. Lisa's hand went to her mouth. For the first time, real shame crossed her features. But that's not a real… James caught himself, but not quickly enough. A real what, James? A real family? Like yours? I walked to the second bedroom, pushing open the door. They could see the freshly painted walls, pale yellow with white clouds, the small desk, the bookshelf already filled with children's books. You want to know what real family is? My voice was steady now, stronger. Real family is the diner manager who let me sleep in the break room during winter storms. Real family is my neighbor Tom, who spent his weekends teaching me basic plumbing so I wouldn't have to hire someone. Real family is my coworker Jenny, who invited me to every holiday dinner for 3 years straight, even though I always said no because I was too ashamed. Thunder cracked again, closer now. Rain began to patter against the windows. You sit there in your designer clothes in my house, demanding I give up everything I've built because you think your needs trump my existence. Again. Just like 5 years ago. That's different, my mother protested weakly. We never meant for you to be homeless. We thought you had friends you could stay with. Friends? I laughed harshly. You mean the friends you made me cut ties with when we moved to Oak Hill? Because they weren't our kind of people anymore? My father stood up, his patience finally wearing thin. Now listen here, young lady. We've been more than reasonable. We're offering to help you relocate. We're trying to keep you involved in the family. But this attitude… Involved in the family? I cut him off. Like you involved me in James's engagement, his wedding, the family holidays, the Sunday dinners? Were you planning to involve me in my niece or nephew's life only when you needed something from me? James stood too, his face reddening. That's enough. You're acting like a victim, but you chose this. You chose to distance yourself. I chose? My voice rose for the first time, making them all flinch. I chose to sleep in my car. I chose to shower at a gym. I chose to miss my high school graduation because I was working 3 jobs to survive. The storm outside matched my fury now, rain lashing against the windows. You know what I did choose? I continued, my voice dropping to a deadly quiet. I chose to survive. I chose to work until my feet bled. I chose to study until I couldn't see straight. I chose to build something from nothing, while you chose to pretend I didn't exist until you wanted something from me. Sarah, Lisa spoke up, her voice trembling. Please, we're just trying to create a good life for our baby, a stable home. And my stability doesn't matter? My dreams don't matter? The children I hope to foster don't matter? I pointed to the yellow bedroom. That room represents hope for kids who have nowhere else to go, kids like I was. But you want me to give it up so your baby can have a bigger playroom? The silence that followed was deafening. Even the storm seemed to pause. Get out. My voice was quiet but firm. Sarah, my mother started. Get out. I walked to the front door and opened it. Get out of my house. The house that I bought, the house that I fixed, the house that I turned into a home while you were all playing happy family without me. They didn't move at first, stunned by my directness. The rain poured in through the open door, creating a small puddle on my carefully restored hardwood floors. Floors I'd spent 3 weekends sanding and refinishing by hand. You can't be serious, James finally said, his voice caught between anger and disbelief. You're really choosing this house over your family, over your own niece or nephew? No, James, I replied, my voice steady despite the storm both outside and within me. I'm choosing myself. For the first time since that night 5 years ago, I'm choosing myself. My mother rose shakily, her perfect makeup starting to smudge from held-back tears. Darling, you're upset. We understand. But surely we can discuss this rationally. Rationally? I let out a short, bitter laugh. Like how you rationally decided to kick out your teenage daughter, or how you're rationally demanding I give up my home for your golden child. That's enough, my father thundered, his business facade finally cracking. You ungrateful… He caught himself, but I saw it. The flash of real anger, the mask slipping. Ungrateful, I repeated softly. Ungrateful for what, Dad? For teaching me that I meant nothing compared to your image, for showing me that family is conditional on usefulness. Lisa stood up then, one hand protectively over her belly. James, she whispered, maybe we should… No! James cut her off. This is ridiculous, Sarah. You're being selfish. You've always been selfish. Some things are bigger than your petty grudges. This is about family. Family? I stepped closer to him, my voice dropping dangerously low. Let me tell you what I learned about family, James. Family isn't about blood, or names, or social status. It's about who shows up, who stays, who helps you build rather than tear you down. Thunder crashed outside, emphasizing my words. You want to know something funny? I continued, walking to my desk and pulling out a folder. I got pre-approved for a loan last week. I was going to buy Mom and Dad's old house, the one before Oak Hill. It's on the market. I thought… My voice caught slightly. I thought maybe we could heal, start over where we were last happy. The silence in the room was absolute now, broken only by the storm outside. I was going to surprise you all next week, invite you over for dinner, show you I'd made something of myself, show you I still cared, despite everything. I laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. Isn't that pathetic? After everything, I still wanted your approval. My mother stepped toward me, hand outstretched. Sarah, sweetheart. Don't. I stepped back. Don't sweetheart me now, not when you're here to take away everything I've built. Again. But the baby, Lisa started. We'll have everything, I cut her off. 2 sets of grandparents with massive houses, trust funds, private schools, country club memberships. Meanwhile, the foster children I hope to help will have nothing. Again. I walked to the door, holding it wider. The rain was soaking my doormat now, but I didn't care. So, this is your choice? My father asked, his voice hard. You'd choose spite over family? No, Dad, I replied, feeling a strange calm settle over me. I'm choosing justice over manipulation. I'm choosing the family I built over the one that abandoned me. I'm choosing to break the cycle. James stood, pulling Lisa up with him. You'll regret this, he said darkly. When you're all alone in this house, when you've pushed away your real family for some misguided revenge. I'm not alone, James, I interrupted. I have a real family. They're just not you. One by one, they filed past me into the rain. My mother paused at the threshold, her mascara finally running despite her best efforts to maintain composure. When you calm down, she said softly. When you've had time to think. I've had 5 years to think, Mom, I replied. 5 years of holidays alone, 5 years of building myself back up from nothing. I don't need more time. She flinched but stepped out into the rain. My father followed without a word, his jaw set in that familiar, stubborn line. James guided Lisa to the door, his arm protective around her shoulders. Lisa paused, turning to me. I'm sorry, she whispered, so quietly I almost missed it. I didn't know about before. I nodded once, acknowledging her words but offering nothing more. They walked down my front path, the one I'd laid myself, brick by brick, last summer. As their expensive cars pulled away, I closed my door and leaned against it, sliding down to sit on my floor. The storm continued to rage outside, but inside, for the first time in years, I felt completely calm. My phone buzzed. A text from Tom next door. Everything okay? Saw the cars leave. I've got leftover lasagna if you need dinner company. Another buzz. Jenny from work. Home study tomorrow. Got the guest room all ready for the inspector. We're all rooting for you. A third message. Maria from the old diner. My nephew just started community college. Says the scholarship you set up made it possible. You're changing lives, girl." I smiled through my tears, reading these messages from my real family. The family I chose. The family that chose me back. Standing up, I walked to the yellow bedroom and straightened a picture on the wall. A simple drawing of a house with a big heart inside it. Below it, I'd framed my foster care certification application. "Welcome home," I whispered to the empty room, but I wasn't thinking about myself anymore. I was thinking about the children who would come here, who would find safety within these walls. Children who, like me, needed someone to choose them. Outside, the storm began to fade and a ray of sunlight broke through the clouds, casting a rainbow through my window. Sometimes the most beautiful things come after the darkest storms. I had chosen myself, finally, and in doing so, I had chosen to become the person I needed 5 years ago. Not just a survivor, but a builder. Not just of houses, but of homes. Not just of walls, but of hope.